Let's drop the green flag on this episode of the Talent Tank Podcast with your host, Wyatt Pemberton, bringing you the best, fastest, most knowledgeable personalities in Ultra4 and Offroad racing.
All right. Here we go. Today on the Talent Tank, we're back at it. I've got, the most mysterious man in Ultra4 racing to cap off this fall season of Ultra4 and the Talent Tank. Man, I've got Paul Horschel on the show today. Paul, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Glad to tell my story.
Yeah.
Guess everybody thinks I'm mysterious, but
well, I don't know if
really
it's mysterious. So. It's just people just don't know, so they fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I'm just a normal guy. Loves racing. Have a family. Doing what I love.
Well, that you do, man. And you build some amazing race cars and you're self-taught. And I've really been looking forward to sitting down with you and spending a couple hours with you, getting kind of your story captured, I guess. I mean, you're the driver of the number 19 4400 car, bright orange, says Nitto down the side.
Yeah. That's definitely me. Racing is a whirlwind.
Everybody listening. So we hit some tech snags. Paul and I talked at Nationals in Oklahoma a few weeks ago, and I handed him one of the Pelican cases, the interview kits that I hand out. And tonight, let's back up a little bit. A few weeks ago, before Baja, we went to record, and the power went out at your house, and the internet was out at your house, and then we ended up not being able to record at all. You went to Mexico, and it's crazy. My notes were like, hey, what's next? Here at the very end, hey, what's next for you? Win Baja, right? Because you were getting ready to go to Baja. Well, you won Baja.
Yeah, that was the goal. So somehow it came out that way, which is amazing to go down there and win Baja first time. But yeah, that was the goal. It was pretty crazy getting ready for Baja. It was just nonstop. We had, I think it was about, I don't even know. I think it was 2 weeks after Nationals. And then we went to Moab also in between there for 4 days, go do some rock crawling. It was straight changing motors and changing transmissions, prepping the car, just one thing after another. It's been like a whirlwind for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
To go down and win a Baja is pretty amazing. It's like my childhood dream, and to get that done, it's pretty cool.
You took your 2-seater down there. You teamed up with another known fellow that we all know and love, Lauren Healy.
Yeah, Lauren, it was a pretty good match. He's a little bigger than me, so he kind of had to squeeze in the car, but, we kind of have the same sponsors with Nitto, and Lauren's been down in Baja a few times. It made a lot of sense to go down there with Lauren because he, had a chase truck, brought a bunch of spare parts. He drives one of my other cars, so he's kind of used to the car. He wasn't going to get a lot of seat time in before hopping in,
Right.
So,
yeah, he has a single seater that he got off you, but you guys were racing a 2-seater.
That's correct. He was racing in my 2-seater, or we were both racing in the 2-seater, but which has the same front IFS as the car that Lauren is racing currently.
Characteristics are the same or similar.
It's similar, yeah. It's a little bit bigger car, but not too much. Just holds a little more fuel. Set up for 2 guys. You definitely wouldn't want to go down to Baja and race as a single seater. At least I wouldn't. I'd probably blow every corner down there.
Just staying in it.
It's just a lot of corners. They say this Baja was the toughest Baja yet, which was, it was just corner after corner after corner. It was just nonstop for 1,000 miles or 900 miles. It was
just a lot of turns, Were there a lot of steering pump failures? Did you notice anything like that on guys, or rack failures on other cars?
Yeah, there was quite a few. I think the Menzies truck broke the rack, or our pump was pretty much toast by the time it got to the finish line. It was whining pretty good. So, but it made it. I didn't notice anything in the car as we got there, but I could hear a noise coming in the truck about mile 800. And then when we got to the finish line, it was definitely needs a rebuild.
And then you guys kind of had some ringers on chase crews. You guys had like Dave Cole and his guys.
Yeah, Dave Cole has been really awesome. He's always told me, whenever you want to go to Baja, just let me know. And I've always kind of kept that in the back of my head. And, and then this year with COVID and the whole not racing. It just kind of made sense for me to go race Baja this year. Most years we're too busy to go race. So it made a lot of sense for us to go, and Dave wasn't doing anything. So it was like, made a lot of sense to just like, okay, let's, he just wanted to come help. And, he's won Baja. He knows all about Baja. We just don't know anything. We just go down there and we're just a couple of guys going down there and hitting the race course,
Drink beer, eat
There's
tacos.
a lot more. I didn't even do any of that. I didn't eat any tacos and I didn't drink any beer because my focus is racing and I can't have a bad gut.
Oh,
I gotta sacrifice the tacos
so
for the racing.
I saw a video, and man, you're gonna laugh when you hear that I've seen this, but Will Gentile sent me a video months and months and months ago when we were talking about you, and they're interviewing you for something, and they said you have two choices. You're almost to the finish line, you're in first place, and you have to take a dump. You gotta take a number 2. And it's like, do you number 2 in your fire suit or do you hold it? Like, how bad do you hold it? And you were just, no. Is do you take it in your fire suit or do you get out? You pull off and, go hide behind a cactus or something. And you said I'd hold it. And they said, that's not an option.
It is an option. What's crazy is we raced for the first 450 miles and I didn't take a piss the whole time. I can't pee in a race car. I can drink water. When I get out, I pee like 5 gallons. And my bladder was just killing me. I was like, what's wrong with my stomach? I thought it was all the bumps. And then I got out of the car and I was talking to my wife and I was like, yeah, my stomach. And she was like, well, it's probably your bladder. It's probably entirely full.
And she's fully qualified to give you that advice too. We'll talk about your wife here in a little bit, but she's a doctor.
Yeah, that's right. So, but it's crazy that, I physically can't pee while I'm driving the race car. So I don't think I'd have a problem holding it. It just, you somehow just hold it in. I guess it's just, you're just so tense, or I'm so tense driving, corner to corner that I just don't have the time to do it.
Hey, that's fair. I get that. I don't have a problem going in the race car. Like I can, which you never know. You never know till you're in that situation. Can you go or not go? And turns out I have no problem going full wide open throttle in a turn. Just all I have to do is think about it for a split second. Like, yeah, I could go to the bathroom and it goes. And then there's those guys can't go at all, or they have to be stopped. And I just talked about this with Pam Hall a few weeks ago, about women going to the restroom in the car and how does that work? And that was 5 minutes of hilarity. I was laughing most of it.
Yeah. How does that work?
They really only have one option.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they better hope they're like me. They can handle it for 450 miles of Baja. I think that was the longest I've ever done it.
That's so figure, what were you guys averaging? 50 miles an hour was average?
This Baja was really technical. I think it was low 40s.
Low 40s.
It was.
So that puts you 11, 12 hours without a piss.
I think it was about 11 hours before we got out, 11 and a half or something before we got out.
That's a marathon, man. That's awesome.
And I really can't take a piss until like probably about 30 minutes after I get out. And then I can, I calm down and I can just go pee like normal. But it's just, I don't know what it is, but.
Isn't the human body interesting in that regard? I don't know. Do you think it's physical or do you think it's mental, or both?
I think it's definitely mental. I think it's just, I can't slow my mind down enough because there's these speed zones in Baja where you get on the highway for 10 miles at 37 miles an hour. But everybody would think that, oh yeah, it's perfect time to take a piss. But the problem is you got to go 37 miles an hour. You don't want to go 36 because someone's going to pass you at 37. You know what I mean? If you start, so you're really focused on that speedometer. So there really wasn't a time in Baja where you weren't focused. It was even in the speed zones when you're just cruising on the highway, you were still mentally focused on doing your job. So it's just, I think I focus so much on that stuff that all the other stuff just gets put on hold.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? So was Mitch Sweet your co-driver?
Mitchell Sweat, yeah, he drove. Well, we drove the first 450 together, and then Lauren drove 250. Lauren and my friend Zig. Mitch and I hopped back in for the last 250.
Oh, nice. So you actually handled a big majority of the race, and Lauren only lifted the middle 250 ish.
Yeah, no. So we hopped back in for the last 200. So I drove 650. He drove 250. Yeah. I mean, Dave was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to jump back in the car after like, 4 or 5 hour nap?" And I'm like, "Dude, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I don't even want to get out of the car." But tell you what, after going 450, I was looking forward to Lauren getting in the truck.
Fair enough. and it worked out. So what was your lead? What was your split time lead at the 450 when you got out? Do you know at this point?
We didn't pre-run the first, I think it was about 40 miles of the race course. And Shannon actually passed us in a speed zone. So I don't know how all that works, but right at the end of a speed zone, he went around us. So we just basically followed in behind him and just cruised. I mean, Dave was constantly calling me on the radio, just keep going. Don't try to pass him, just go. So we just cruised, and at mile 420 or 410-ish, he was doing a driver change with Waylon. And at that point, Dave was calling me on the radio telling us we're, less than a mile back. Just don't try and pass them. It's not worth it. So we pulled in there. They were swapping drivers. We went by them. And we actually driver changed at 450-ish. It just made better sense for fueling. And when we driver changed, Dave said we had a 4.5 minute gap to do the driver change. They had some fueling issues with some redheads. So at that point, Lauren was in the car. He's like, "Can I go? Can I go? Can I go?" And they were having some issues with some redheads. This is one of the only pits we didn't have a tower at. And I think a redhead was seized up or something like that on the dump can. And they wanted to get enough gas in it, but Shannon, or actually it was Waylon at that point, ended up passing us in the driver change there. Then Lauren pretty much peeled out right after him.
And then they had trouble before Lauren, Lauren actually overtook him, right?
I think it was pretty soon. Like within 15 minutes of Lauren driving, they must have hit something and popped a tire because Lauren got around them, and we didn't see him anything after that. I think they made it probably about 500 miles in the race, and I think they broke the rear output of the car.
Yeah.
Our whole game plan was just to drive smart, don't hit any big holes, just keep a good car. And I think it paid off.
And Lauren is great in a desert race. He's very good. Rocks. He'll tell you, his Achilles heel was rocks. Well, Baja doesn't have solid rocks. And, some of the washes have some pretty nasty stuff in them.
Well, I didn't pre-run Lauren's part, but I think he had some rough stuff back there because they were complaining about it. They had all that, down by San Felipe, which is pretty rough. He did take out a drive shaft again, so I don't think he can go to any race without putting a new drive shaft in.
Well, I'd heard him say something about he had experimented with some carbon fiber stuff at sometime last year, and he was shredding those. So I think he's back to non-carbon, right?
Yeah, he's back to non-carbon. But this drive shaft, he didn't actually hit something with it. It was just we were planning to grease it every 250, and somehow when I went to sleep, it got passed up on the grease. So our trucks have a little more plunge than a typical desert truck, so we try and keep the drive shaft greased, and it was just getting a little hot on Lauren, so he had to pull over and change it.
Gotcha.
Another funny story is he ended up getting stuck out in the desert, leaving the pit. I think it was right after the drive shaft change, actually. He he sunk the car right to its axles, right in front of the pit truck. But I don't know if it was his fault but
he just stopped on soft sand and then wooded it to pull away.
Well, the story is, so earlier in the night, they broke a CV boot, and sand had got up into the upper CV on one side of the front, and they ended up cutting the drive shaft or the CV axle out. So one of the front drives was out, and running an ARB in the truck.
So you just run open?
Yeah, so we're running it open, so which is essentially two-wheel drive at that point. So he pulls in for the drive shaft, and Dave tells him, well, actually, Dave's telling him where to pull in for the drive shaft, but it turns out that Dave pulled in and got stuck, so that's where he told Lauren to go. So Dave's chase truck was already stuck. He says, Lauren, just pull right over here next to me, because that's where we're going to do the drive shaft change, because I'm not going anywhere else. So when Lauren tried to leave, he was in two-wheel drive and just sunk it.
Oh, terrible. Okay, so I did see pictures of the chase truck sunk. I didn't realize that was the whole story, that you guys did a pit during that too. And then I did know that you guys had to cut that half shaft off, in between the two CVs, and that seemed to be the right way to go, right? I mean, no reason to pull everything apart when.
Well, our whole game plan with the front end was, if anything goes wrong, just cut it out. I think Lauren must have hit something and shoved some rocks up into the CV boot to cut it out, or to cut the boot.
Was it the inboard one or the outboard?
The inboard CV. So when the car's up full bump, that CV is actually pretty close to the ground, and rocks and everything can fly up in there.
Yep.
So they ended up cutting it out. Our plan was just to unbolt it, which was basically cut the boots and then just stick an impact in there, and you can unbolt it in 5 minutes. But cutting it works too.
Yeah, just sling grease everywhere. Did it get greased on the side of the car?
Oh, there's grease everywhere. It's a race car.
Well, man, congratulations. I mean, I know there's a lot of jealous people on this deal that, it's your first time in Baja and you win the 1,000 in your class. That says something. All right. That's
yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, actually that car, and me and Mitch were 2 for 2 in Baja, because we won the King of Baja last year in that car too.
The San Felipe race. Yeah.
That car's 2 for 2 in Mexico. So it's kind of a bummer. We're going to be cutting it up and using it as a pre-runner pretty soon.
You just build other ones. I know how you work. Yeah. I know how Mitch works as well. You guys just keep cranking them out, and then we'll don't talk about your single seater that you've been racing the last 8 weeks or so. We'll talk about it here in a little bit, because that's there's a lot going on with that. Nationals, we talked at Nationals. You missed, winning that race by 30 seconds. Yeah, I mean, what
I think it was in the 20s or 30s. It was. Well, I think I lost 4 races this year under 30 seconds, which was kind of a bummer.
That was the number 4.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, you can't win them all, but some of them, we always look back and like, what did we do here? What did we do here? And a lot of them is just like, this is what we did, and it was our fault. But, it's tough on some of those races with lap traffic. It plays a huge part. Eric just won that race. I mean, I just couldn't pass the lap traffic that was ahead of me.
Well, and then Blyler, blowing the infield, double that confusion, and how, he ends up throwing away the national championship on a navigation error.
Yeah. That's one thing. The focus of racing is, when you're focused so hard on racing, sometimes you make those bad judgment calls. Like, did I go around the start finish? Did I not go around the start finish? That race is kind of confusing, but I have my guys, they're like, I come out of those woods and it's like, did you make sure you go around the start finish? And then you went around the start finish. now you're heading to the woods, or now you're heading to there. I mean, we just don't take any chances on that sort of thing. I mean, the more information to the driver, the better, because the driver is really focused, on racing. So the stuff comes up on you really quick, and it's just a split second, turn right, turn left. It's just, you have to have somebody there to help you do that stuff.
And it got a bunch of people. It got some people in the UTV race. I don't know if it got anybody in the EMC race, but when it happened,
it gets people every year, and I'm just like, how do these people do it? But I could, one of these days it might even get me. I hope not.
We hope not, right? Knock on the wood.
Yeah. But I mean, that race was pretty cool. I mean, it was, that new car is working great. It's just, when it comes down to, I think we had about a 3-minute lead on Eric going into the woods, and I knew I could hold the same pace as him through the woods. So I did. Going into that lap, they told me I had a 3-minute lead. I could hold the same pace and I would win the race, no problem. But, with lap traffic, I just got held up probably about 3.5 minutes, and that was it.
It was enough
to take it out. Yeah. I ended up going up that waterfall thing and sliding backwards behind a guy. And
that was
horrible.
That 30-degree or 40-degree up to your right out of the creek.
Yeah, you kind of go out of a creek and, just start going up the hill. You kind of go up this rock face and go back around. And, a lot of these guys don't hit this stuff with speed. And if you follow too close, I really hate following people, but when you're trying to pass people, sometimes you have to follow them until it opens up. But, it should be nice if these guys would just try to move out of the way since they're a whole lap down. You know what I mean? It's just.
Don't hold up the leaders.
Yeah. I mean, a couple people told me I just got to start using the front bumper more. And that's my plan for this year. I just have to. It just costs me too many races to not use the front bumper.
Well, there's everybody's warning right there. You just put it out there. Yeah. I'm going to start hitting people, but let's just be very serious and honest about this. The fun, it is fun for you. But the business side of it is you had four times this year. You were out of first place by less than 30 seconds, 4 times.
Yeah. Well, the first 2 I definitely lost to Lauren. It was new car setup and stuff like that. But the second 2, the last one was definitely lap traffic, and the one in Moab was definitely lap traffic, but it was also some errors on our pit side of things. We were just trying to keep that 3-minute gap, so they had me going really slow for 3 laps. My guys were just saying, go slow, go slow, go slow. And then they weren't keeping track of the Gomez brothers who were coming up pretty quick behind me. And by the time I got the call on the last lap, which laps were taken, I think I did a lap there in 16 minutes. By the time they told me on the last lap, I had to make up 2 minutes. It just wasn't possible. I think it was possible, but I just got hung up, by a guy that was a lap down and a pretty fast guy, but he was, 80% my speed, making a bunch of dust, and I just couldn't take the chance. Yeah, I couldn't take the chance because it's so tight there to get around people.
No, that's
and it just took me 4 or 5 miles to get around them, and then by that time I can't make up 2 minutes.
Well,
so
let's talk about Paul. Let's talk about who you are outside of the racing world, and then we'll go through some stuff, and then we'll circle back to racing. But currently, you're sitting tonight. You're over in Park City, Utah, where you live, family. But you grew up Alaska, right?
Yeah, I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska. Lived in a little town about 100 miles south of there called Delta Junction, Alaska, right on the Tanana River. Alaska is an amazing place. Growing up, I went to school in the same grade as my older brother. So my older brother was a year older than me, but due to difficulties with my mom not being able to drive a car and my dad working up in the oil fields, it just made sense for him to put us both in the same grade.
Okay.
So he was 5 and I was 4 when we went to kindergarten, and we went all the way through high school in Delta.
You're from a pretty big family too. I think, you told me 6 sisters, 2 brothers, is that right?
Yeah. I got, my mom and dad. They still live up in Delta Junction. My mom runs a little restaurant up there. I have 6 sisters and 2 brothers. I have Lydia, my youngest, Stephanie, Phoebe, Anna, Esther, and Claudia, who is older than me. Then I got a younger brother, Luke, and my older brother, Abe, who I went to school with. We're all spread out now, but most of them still live up in Alaska.
You have a place up there now, don't you?
Yeah, we ended up buying a place that I actually, when I was about 13 or 14, it was a big, huge log place on this big piece of property that I actually peeled the logs for and sanded the logs when I was, going to high school and building. And the guy ended up dying probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we ended up buying the place. So it's kind of right in between my wife's house, or the house where my wife grew up, and the house where I grew up. So it's kind of cool to go back there and relax. It's on a creek on a river, and we got about 154 acres or so up there. So it's pretty cool to go up there and, do whatever you want.
Yeah. And now, I mean, living in Park City, I saw, I was looking at your stuff that you have on Instagram, but you guys had I think you guys were getting ready for a race. Chase trucks are in the driveway and a moose walks like I think it was like Mitch. I think Mitch is like standing on a chase truck and then like the moose just like walks by him.
Yeah, growing up in Alaska, I'm used to moose, so they don't really scare me or bother me. I mean, moose were everywhere up there. They're like deer. But down here in Utah in general, they're not around as much. But up where we live, we're kind of up on this ridge, and we see moose probably at least once a week. And I've got pictures of 5 moose at one time in my backyard.
Oh wow!
So, yeah.
So as I was walking in the room here to get on the phone with you and get this going tonight, I was telling my wife, who are you interviewing tonight? I said, Paul Horschel. I said, you know what? He lives in Park City, and we're sitting here. We're booking spring break. Our kids actually now have a 2-week spring break coming up, and we're going to fly to Salt Lake no matter what. But it was between Park City and Jackson Hole, and once the kids were shown all the different activities, Jackson Hole won out. So sorry, we're not going to come see you in March, or maybe we will. I don't know. But yeah, the current plan is to go up to Jackson Hole, but Park City was in the mix. And I was like, oh yeah. So Paul lives in Park City. And I looked at the kids. I go, he has a ski lift in his backyard. He installed his own ski lift. And they're like, what? Who has that? I'm like, we have a 175-foot zip line in my backyard, but not a ski lift. So tell me about this. Tell me about your place there in Park City with a ski lift. How cool is that?
Well, we don't quite have the ski lift up yet, but it's always been the dream of mine since I was into snowboarding. So I always wanted to give my kids that experience, but it's always been like a dream of mine to have a ski lift in the backyard. And we ended up buying this piece of property on a big hill. So we ended up picking up 2 rope tows this summer, and we got one of them in. We still got to put the cable on it, and I'm doing some modifications to the electric motor right now to get it to work. The second one, with Baja Racing, and I mean, it's just too time consuming because we physically had to go clear lift lines and, ski trails. So I was running an excavator up in there, just pretty much opening the mountainside up just to make this happen. So it'll be, yeah, then winter happened. So now we got snow on the ground. So we'll have the one ski lift done and running this year, but the second one will be probably next year before we get it in.
All right. I'm inviting myself already.
It's going to be a fun time. I got a snowcat too. I got a little Prenoff snowcat that we bought so we can go out and, build jumps, whatever you want to do. So
yeah,
we'll send you down on an inner tube.
Well, that works. Yeah. I want to talk about your snowcats here in a little bit for sure. Sorry, we did get ahead. Yeah. So your wife and you both grew up in Delta Junction, which is, halfway between Fairbanks and Anchorage.
I'd say it's
a little closer,
probably a quarter of the way, because we're about 100 miles to Fairbanks and about 350 to Anchorage.
Oh, is it that far?
By the roadway, road miles.
But and that was my next question. How much did you fly? Basically, everyone says that if you live in Alaska, you just fly everywhere.
I didn't fly anywhere till I was probably 18 or so, or 20. I mean, we drove everywhere. We just didn't leave Alaska. So basically, when I graduated school when I was 17 and my brother was 18, we hopped in a car and we drove to Utah. We didn't know a soul in Utah, much less in the lower 48. We were just 2 kids in a car, and we looked at magazines, and we were all into snowboarding. So we looked at all these. It was before internet and all this stuff. This is early 90s. Late.
So like Outside Magazine and
like snowboarding magazines. And we were like, we would just look at the stats of the lifts. Like, oh, this ski area has 3,000 vert. Oh, this one has gets this much snow. So we just it was all about the statistics, and we were just like, okay, we're going to Utah. So we just hopped in a car, didn't have much else to do. Crazy thing is I worked all summer and he did too, but I was 17 and he was 18. So I kind of got this job that I wasn't supposed to have, but they paid a lot of money and they didn't ask me how old I was. So we, we had a big pile of cash, so we just, we're moving to Utah. So we just drove down to Utah. And
was that 1994?
1994. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, we were just two kids. I mean, now looking back at some of the stories, and I mean, there's one, we moved to Utah and we didn't know anything about Utah. We'd never been outside of Alaska. So we go to Utah and it says Salt Lake City. So we go to Salt Lake City and we start trying to find a place to live. So we find this, rundown motel, like 700 South State Street that we're staying at. And to us, it was pretty nice, but it was just like this little, one story, like
roach motel.
Like it was definitely a roach motel. So
like termites holding hands, right?
Oh, we didn't even know. The only clue we got was we were trying to rent a house, and we had all this money, but we didn't have any credit cards. We didn't have any, references or anything. It was just a couple kids, right? So nobody would rent us a house. And finally, this one lady, she told us, she was like, you know what? I'm not going to rent you this house, but let me give you a hint. Don't put that hotel on your application, because nobody's going to rent you a house if you're staying at that hotel.
Fair enough. So, that's good advice. That
yeah. So I mean, we were just two kids. It's just crazy looking back at it, that how we made it all work.
But it's a great story. So what was the first job you guys got, and what did you guys do when you first got down here to the lower 48?
Well, when I was 17 and he was 18 that summer, we worked as firefighters. So, and firefighting paid pretty good back then. And then when we moved to Utah, I got a job as a lift operator at Snowbird, and ran lift over there. It just allowed us to go. We were just into snowboarding, so whatever it took to go snowboarding. And we picked Snowbird as we'd never been there, but it was just, statistically a good place. So we just started going snowboarding there.
So you're always into snowboards, but I know you were, based on how you are today, you've kind of always been into anything with a motor, right?
I've been into motors. I think it was about 1984 when my dad he came home with a Honda Big Red 3-wheeler. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh yeah. Murder machines. Absolutely. The suspension was the tires.
Yeah. It was, no suspension in the back, and then it had low range in it. It had the high-low, shaft drive. It was like awesome. So I started driving that when I was 7 years old. It was because no one else liked to drive. Like my older brother and older sister didn't want to drive. They were like, Paul, you drive. And I was like, okay, I like to drive, so I'll drive.
All right.
But I ended up getting hit by a car, broke my leg. I was 7 years old. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but ever since then, I was just into motors and into motorcycles. I probably started driving motorcycles when I was 10. We didn't have much money, so we just had cheap dirt bikes that we could, pick up for $500 or whatever. And we always tried to modify them to go, we always, looked at other people's bikes and like, why is this guy, he's got this bike and it's so much faster. So we would just try and modify our bikes to be faster, because they were always the dual shock bikes versus, the mono shock bikes back in the day. But we'd always put bigger shocks on them. I remember on my 3-wheeler cutting the whole front end off of it and putting shocks on it, motorcycle forks on the front end, probably when I was 13 years old. Just a better suspension, go faster.
Solving problems. What year did you get into snowmobiles? Were you already down, living in Utah by snowmobiling, or was that actually something that you guys were around in Alaska?
I was around snowmobiling in Alaska, but I never got a snowmobile till I was probably about 13 years old, just because they were too expensive. Finally, my parents bought me a used snowmobile. Ended up blowing the motor in it, working on it a lot, but it was a good project. And I didn't really. Alaska, everybody thinks Alaska as like big, huge mountains and stuff, but where we grew up was more flatlands. The big mountains were there, but the access was just too hard to get to. So we just rode snowmobiles, in the fields and stuff like that. But I didn't get into mountain snowmobiling until I moved down to Utah and was down here. And then we wanted to go out and go snowboarding up in the bigger mountains behind the ski lifts, and it was like, well, let's just get a snowmobile. So we got into snowmobiling that way. kind of back into snowmobiling that way. And, having the snowboarding background of like, let's go down this chute, and then we got snowmobiles and it's like, let's go up this chute, so it was like, it was a whole new ball game to try.
And just like rock crawlers that like break a trail for the first time and they get to name the trail, you've done some chutes, some pretty gnarly climbs, and you've got to name some climbs.
Yeah, it's, we broke a lot of climbs down here in Utah and up in Canada even too. And it's pretty amazing where these sleds will go. I mean, most people won't even, they don't even look at up at the mountainside to actually see the chute because their snowmobiles can't even go up there. It's kind of like rock crawling. Like if you are an extreme rock crawler, you look at different stuff, you know what I mean? Whereas if you're a trail wheeler, you don't look at the extreme rock on the side of the trail and try and get your buggy over it. But that's kind of where we took snowmobiling, was into that extreme area of like chutes. We pretty much for 3 or 4 years, it was find every chute and climb it. It was in Utah, Nevada, everywhere.
Obviously you always need more horsepower. So then that parlayed into you doing some work, developing some turbo kits, because you can't leave well enough alone. Knowing Paul.
Well, it's always, need more horsepower. Like I want to do that, but my head is holding me back. So it's like, what do we do? Well, let's turbocharge that. I was into like turbo cars when I was probably, I think I was 17 or so. I got a turbocharged car, RX-7. So I was, always trying to turn up the boost on that thing. And when I got into snowmobiling, I'm like, man, why don't they just put a turbo on this thing? So we ended up turboing those sleds and getting, 400 plus horsepower out of them. And they pretty much, they'll scare you what they'll climb up. I mean, it is unbelievable.
Anything you can hang on to, as long as you can hang on to it, it'll go up it, right?
Well, you still got to ride it. So, you still got to have the skills to navigate this machine up it. But and then when you don't make it, it's pretty much a yard sale at the bottom. You'll be sliding down on your butt, picking up parts all the way.
So that's a lot of, I know talking to Tom Ways about this, you two have kind of bonded over that. Like you guys have a lot of commonalities. I mean, he was from Pennsylvania, ended up at SCORE, and then ended up in Southern Alaska doing similar, the stuff that you were doing in Utah, he was doing in Alaska, even though you came from Alaska and came to Utah. I mean, that's kind of cool to have a guy inside Ultra4 that you guys can sit and, rap session about that type of stuff, right?
Yeah, Tom's always been cool. I mean, I kind of knew a friend of Tom's from my snowboarding days named Chris Coulter, and Chris knew I was building this Ultra4 car, and he was like, well, I know this guy Tom that races Ultra4. So Chris would be telling Tom, hey, this guy Paul's building this car, and Tom was like, thinking like, but I don't know what he was thinking, but then I show up to this race and Tom was there, and he was like, oh, you're Paul? And he's like, oh, you got an IFS car? So we kind of bonded right away. He was like, he was into the same stuff I was into, up in the mountains, snow. He was on skis, I was on snowboards, but it was always, I think he's the same as me in that sort of thrill seeking of going down a mountain fast or, hitting a jump.
I think you two are amazing, but I think you're nut jobs, and that's okay with me. Like, I think you guys are badasses, but you're still crazy as all get out. But the thing is, if I grew up and was around the same stuff as you guys, we'd be, birds of a feather flock together. I'd be like, oh, you're going up there? Okay, I guess I'll go up it. And the next thing you know, you're there.
Well, that's how it works. I mean, it's just, pushing. You see one guy, it's just evolution. You see one guy do a 360 and you want to do a 540. That's just the next step. It's trying to be better than the other guy, or do that, the trick a little better, or do, race a little faster than the other guy. I guess it's how I've always been since I was young. I guess it's just competition,
So, lose 4 races this year by less than 30 seconds. So we're going to move the goals up to like lose 4 races by less than 10 seconds. Is that?
No.
The look on your face is great.
The goal is always to win, but I mean,
absolutely.
Sometimes it's car break. Sometimes you just can't win. Sometimes there's other problems, but you try and win as many as you can. And that's 100% the goal, is to come and, number one spot.
And
You
that is,
definitely don't want the number two spot. I mean, that's the worst.
yeah, that's your mindset. Yeah, I love your mindset on that. That's the absolute right mindset to be a winner there and be successful at that. I'm going to mispronounce these, but I know you've got one. We talked about snow machines or snowcats. Hageland? How do you pronounce that?
It's a Hagland. So I actually own 3 of them, but they're
Describe what that thing is.
It's a military amphibious vehicle. So this all goes back to growing up as a kid, and there was a military base that was located nearby, and these Haglands would always be driving around.
Okay.
And I used to always think to myself, man, I'd like to have one of those when I get, find out how to make some money. So I ended up buying a couple that we have up in Alaska. They're really hard to find.
Yeah, they look like Russian Arctic Circle type things, but then they have like this little twist of they look like you just see them like normal on a ski mountain anywhere in North America.
It's kind of a cool vehicle because it's all mechanically driven. So 2 of them that I own have motor swaps in them, and one still isn't finished. I put a Ecotech 2.0 liter turbocharged motor in there that makes 340 horse and a turbo 400. And it basically runs a drive shaft out of the turbo 400 into a divorced transfer case.
Okay.
And out of the transfer case has a drive shaft that runs the back 2 tracks. And then the drive shaft comes out of the front of the transfer case and runs the front 2 tracks.
Okay.
And so it's 4-wheel or 4-track drive, which is kind of odd, but it makes it easy. It's like a rock crawler. It's like a Jeep, like you don't like that motor. Well, put a different motor in it. So it's kind of a cool vehicle in that regard, but it does have its base restraints that you can only put so big of a motor in there. It's not like you can just let's put this big block in there.
No
but
room.
It's an amphibious vehicle that actually goes on water, land, dirt, snow. It was made for the U.S. military, made in Sweden by a company called Hagland. Pretty cool vehicle. We use them for hunting up in Alaska.
And then like inside, like how many people can you get inside one? 4 plus gear or?
No, it's a 17 passenger vehicle. That's what it's rated
huge.
For.
See, that's why
it's not huge though. It's 6 feet wide.
Yeah. See, they look small in your pictures.
Yeah. So it's 6 feet wide and about 23 feet long, but it's the way the military designed it was 6 passengers in the front and 11 in the back.
Okay.
But it's really it's a pretty compact vehicle. But I mean, you could obviously get that many people in there. But the capability of that vehicle is pretty. I mean, it can go across rivers. It can go through snow, through mud. It's just you can pretty much go anywhere. So it's just a pretty cool vehicle in that regard.
Well, I like them. I was curious. I was curious to hear exactly what they were and how they came to be, and like how you ended. I didn't realize you had so many of them, but that's even awesome too. That's super cool.
Whenever I see one for sale, I mean, they usually don't cost that much money unless you buy like a fully refurbed one. But whenever I see one or parts for sale, I just buy it just because you can't get that stuff.
They're that rare.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a few hundred of them around, but I mean, most people just have them. They're not selling them. They're, using them.
Well, I saw Jason Shearer, he's got a snowcat, or maybe he has 2 snowcats now. Like I think they're like 4 or 6 passenger deals that they run around their little mountain area around Tahoe, or forget the name of it.
Yeah. Jason's got he's got a little Thiokol that, I think it's a Sprite that it's also a mechanical type drive snowcat. This new snowcat we bought is a full hydraulic with a little turbo diesel motor in it. So it should be pretty cool. The mechanical snowcats, you can't really spin on a dime with them because it's more like braking one track.
Okay.
But the Hagland actually doesn't. It turns by articulating the cabs. We're actually putting cutting brakes in that one, so you can put the brakes on tracks on the left or tracks on the right and try to maneuver it a little better.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, so we pretty much don't leave anything stock.
No, I know you don't. No. So we have similar stuff down here on the Gulf Coast, but it doesn't see snow. It's all for swamp and marsh and that stuff where you wouldn't use an airboat for. because it's not airboat type terrain, but it's mud gumbo, and they drive those things across the top of them. So like the telephone crews, the power line crews, that's what they drive. There's a lot of those on the Gulf Coast.
That's pretty much what we use them in Alaska for, because Alaska is a lot moose hunting up there. You're in the lowlands a lot.
Yep.
So yeah, those things are amazing in the swamps. They just cruise. They float. They haul a lot of stuff. We go out hunting, and I bring all my sisters, nieces, nephews. I mean, they just, we go out 40, 50 miles with kids that are under 2 years old. Just it's just a fun time.
So your wife, Dr. Hillary, you've known her your whole life?
I want to say not my whole life, but probably, it's hard to remember that far back, but probably since I was 6. Because maybe a little earlier than that, but that's when I kind of moved over to her neighborhood area. And we lived a couple miles apart, but there was probably only like 3 houses between us, So we pretty much rode the bus together to school for, 12 years or 10 years. So yeah, we didn't start dating until later in high school, but yeah, we've been together 25 years and married for 16 now.
Well, all of that is congratulations, but what was her thought process in 94 when you and your brother loaded up and moved to the lower 48 and you left her? What'd she say about that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was tough, but it was like, the winters in Alaska are tough. She was still in school. So I had graduated, and it was like, well, I'm going to go down here and do this because I'm not going to sit up here all winter. And I think she was okay with it.
So, right. It doesn't, I mean, that was, we're 25 years ago at this point, but yeah, then she ends up coming down. She ends up going to, college, then med school. And now she's a pediatric ICU doctor, which is amazing. Blows my mind.
Yeah, she works at Primary Children's Hospital here in Salt Lake. That's why we kind of live close to here, or, Park City area. But we basically, when she graduated high school, she moved down to Malibu and went to school at Pemberton for 4 years. And we dated all through that. And then she got accepted in the University of Utah and did her med school here. And then she was able to stay on with them. And now she just works hospital here.
That's awesome. Like, that's like, making the stars align and everything working out perfectly. Yeah, you can't beat that. That's
yeah, we thought we were going to have to do some moving around, but it ended up being that we could actually stay in Utah. So yeah, it was pretty cool to be able to stay here. I think she probably would have liked to move, but not against Utah, but for her career, just staying in one place too long for the stuff she does is, I guess it can be tough. I'm not,
Yeah,
I don't know.
It depends on what your goals are, right? So is she into off-roading? I know she supports everything you do, obviously, but is she into the off-road stuff or any of the racing stuff?
She's not into off-road, but I mean, we grew up off-road, basically. I mean, both of us grew up with no power, no phones until probably I was 14 when the phones showed up. So both of us grew up with no power, she had no bathroom, so no shower. They had an outhouse outside. Our house had running water when you started the generator, but so we both grew up pretty off-roadish, like, I guess they call it off the grid.
Off the grid. Yeah.
Yeah. So whoever wants to live off the grid, you don't want to do that. At least take it from me.
Well, that's probably
you want to be on the grid.
Well, now, and this is making sense. This is probably why you can hold it for so long in a race car, is because you grew up like that. You're like, okay, I need to pee, but it's minus 30 outside. I don't want to bundle up to go to the outhouse.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that, because I think, but that's part of, I mean, that's definitely something, but I don't know if it translates into racing. I think that's just me being tense, but I think, just growing up in that situation of, both of us growing up and wanting to be better is what kind of has brought us, to where we are.
Man, no, it's amazing. Now, today you guys have 2 kids. You've got a son, Matthew, and then a daughter, Lizzie, and they're pretty amazing, right? You're enjoying being a father?
Definitely. We didn't have kids for a long time, and it kind of got to that point where it was like, well, I wanted kids and my wife didn't actually want kids. And she was like, well, if you want kids, we better, have kids, because we don't got too much longer to have these kids, or I don't, you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, we better try and have some kids.
And so here you are.
Having a kid at 40 is pretty rough.
No, man, I said you're crazy earlier, like the snowmobiling and stuff. Yeah. It wasn't all that. It's like collectively crazy. I can't imagine at all. I've even purged the baby diaper stuff from memory, and mine are only, 13 and 9, so.
Yeah, it's been amazing. But you definitely want to do it in your lifetime. And I mean, it was just something we had to do we wanted to do it, but they've been amazing. I mean, they're definitely a lot of work, but having a family, having that support, having, kids that run up and hug you and, call you on the phone. It's a part of life. I think you definitely need experience.
And so recently, being in Baja, you're away from them. So they want to know where daddy went, right?
Yeah. Lizzie, she's like, are you in Mexico? But luckily for now, or nowadays we have, technology like FaceTime. So even in Mexico, they were FaceTiming me every night, Daddy, what are you up to? When are you coming home?
Right.
And that, that sort of thing, but they're amazing. I don't know. Once you have kids, it's like, how would we live without them? So.
No, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. Well,
before kids, you could live without them. You're just like, well, I don't know what kids are, but once you have them, you're just like, we should have had kids 10 years ago.
Well, you and I kind of brought this up when this was when we were scheduling this. You had to make sure that Hillary was going to be home to take the kids, so it would free you up to be able to do the call and some things like that. And I'm like, it takes a village, but it really takes this like scheduling. You need and a wonderful partner that supports you and you support her and all, everything that goes on there. And you guys are clearly doing it right.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of scheduling. Before it was like, oh, I can go snowmobiling and come home at 10 at night. And now it's like, oh, my wife's got to work tonight, or oh, my wife is gets off at 5, so I got to be home, take the kids from 3 to 5. Or it's definitely a lot more responsibility, but it's definitely worth it. But you definitely lose some of that freedom
that's a good trade-off before.
It definitely is.
Well, yeah. You'll have to tell her, or she listens to this. Hillary, thank you for freeing Paul up for me tonight, and for everybody else that's going to listen to this. This is awesome.
Yeah. She's got the kids right now. I told her, I was like, I got this like interview thing for a couple hours, and she looked at me kind of weird, and she's like, okay, do you need me to help you? I was like, probably, but.
Yeah, I don't think she would have solved our speaker microphone issue. That was too much. I mean, hey, it's working out right now. I can see you, but we're recording across the cell phones. It's
technology.
Technology today. Man, I skipped something and I want to go back to it. Like David Hartman and Nick Nelson, they're into the mini jet boats. JT Taylor just pulled the trigger on a mini jet boat. Cody Wagner has him a mini jet boat. I really want one. I don't really think I have a place to ride one. That's why I haven't really bit that off. But you've got one.
Well, mine's a 14-footer, but it's a little bigger. I actually got some CAD drawings I'm working on to build my own mini jet boat, because I got some ideas on how to make it better. But I actually didn't get into jet boating until we bought this place up in Alaska, and then we bought a boat. Just as a kid, we couldn't afford a boat. But Alaska it's an amazing place, but there is no roads to access anything. You just got a couple main highways. Down in the States, we have roads that go, old mining roads, old farming roads, old, access roads everywhere. I mean, there's roads within 5 miles pretty much everywhere down here. In Alaska, as soon as you get off the main road, there's nothing. So a jet boat is
freedom.
It's like exploring up a highway that you've never driven up. So we go up there and we just take these rivers. Well, I got a river right on the back of my house, so we actually dug in a boat ramp there, so I can just unload the boat right behind the house and then just dock it behind the house.
Cool.
And we can just go up and explore the stuff that I always wanted to explore when I was a kid. Like, what's over that hill,
Yeah, I made notes like Paul is a guy that should have a mini jet boat. And then, doing my background on you, sure enough, you already had a mini jet boat, because I think I put in the notes, like, are you into those? Would you be up with one? No, you already have one. Got it.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. But it's just like anything else. It's a lot of fun, but you got to have buddies with them, and they are work too. So,
That's
but the biggest thing is you got to have buddies with them, because you're going to get yourself in places, and if you break down in those places, you're not going to have any help. The guy's got a big boat, you can't go up in there. For the most part, jet boats are just a way of travel up in Alaska. So you can definitely see a lot more country. Another way of travel up there is airplanes, but I've kind of decided to put that on the back burner for a little bit.
It seems like a lot of guys who have gotten out of Ultra4 have gotten into airplanes, and I'm like, man, I'm just not a pilot. I don't think that's what I aspire to do. Even Dave Cole's talked about getting a plane. I'm like, wow, really, Dave? You're flying? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it was all gung-ho until about a year ago when a friend of ours passed away from crashing his airplane down in Moab. But
Carol?
Yeah, Kevin. But I mean, he pretty much had the airplane I wanted to buy. I think Kevin, guys like me, I don't know if airplanes are a good idea, because I think we tend to use an airplane not as a mode of transportation, but as a mode of thrill. I think that could end up bad. So I've decided to, kind of hold off on the airplane maybe till I get a little older or, a little wiser. I don't know. But I think me getting in an airplane and flying up at, 2,000 feet is going to be really boring. And I'm going to want to see if I can go down and buzz that creek, or, go around that rock face or whatever, and it's not going to be, you just don't have second chances in an airplane.
But I think, where your head is at is in the right place on anything in life. On that is that you have at least the self-awareness and the self-respect of what your mind wants to do and what will do and what could happen, that you've been smart about it.
Yeah, I just choose to not put myself in that position. It's just, with kids too, it's just, I want to see them grow up. It's just not worth it to take an airplane out and try and do something dumb in it and crash it and die,
Right. Well, yeah. Kevin Carroll's also that was a bad deal. That was a bad deal. And that was a loss for the community. His red dot chassis, his red dot cars were, they're just billy goats. They're just amazing billy goats.
Yeah, but Kevin was just, he was the same. I just look at Kevin and just, I understand what he was trying to do. He was trying to take his red dot cars, like places where people couldn't take his cars. And he's trying to do the same with airplanes. And I think you can do it for a long time, but, there's so much variation in an airplane, like, an extra 200-pound passenger in the back, or full of fuel and not full of fuel, or the wind. Whereas a car, you're just grounded. It doesn't matter about any of that stuff. And you could hit a downdraft or something in an airplane. And, when you're taking chances you could easily not make it, where the other day you made it, no problem.
Right. Yeah. Wow. No, I can see that. I think your head's in the right spot on that, man. So job wise, you're in explorational drilling, kind of in the oil field a little bit. You're at a company called Tonatech, and you've been there 20 years now, long time, drilled all over the world now.
I started in the drilling business when I was 18. So after the year we moved to Utah, we would go back to Alaska in the summers. It obviously paid a lot more money up there. So we got jobs. And when I was 18, I got a job on a drill rig. So I pretty much worked for that company from 18 to 29-ish. So 10 or 12 years-ish. And I started just being a drill hand, and worked my way up to being the operations manager over, 20 drill rigs when I was, 29, 30. And then it was more of a family-owned company. It had that more family atmosphere. It wasn't family-owned, but we were a smaller company. It was, didn't have that corporation feel to it, and it got bought out by the second largest drilling company in the world at that time, and it was instantly overnight. It just changed the whole feel of the company. It was kind of weird because I thought I'd work there for the rest of my life. And then that happened, and it was just a different atmosphere. So 2 guys that I worked with for, those 12 years, and I decided to start our own business back in 2007. We didn't have any money, but we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't even know anything about business, really. We knew how to drill holes in the ground.
Right.
But we made it work, and we're still a small company. We have about anywhere from 50 to 70 employees, and we have 11 drill rigs, and we drill core holes, and we focus most of our stuff on the Western U.S. And it's more what we're good at, deep core holes.
Like how deep do you guys go?
Deepest hole we've drilled was 9,200 feet.
What's the temperature at the bottom of that hole, or where it was?
I don't know exactly, because we don't really temperature probe, but
Gotcha.
some of those holes that we do temperature probe can get up to like 180-ish somewhere. But, sometimes we've drilled some geothermal holes that have had higher temperatures than that. But most of the time when you drill deep, it starts to get warmer.
Right.
So we're drilling for minerals most of the time. So they don't really care about the temperature.
Now, is that something that you and Lauren have had some commonalities and ability to have some discussions on about, because similar backgrounds, Lauren working for Core Labs for all those years.
Yeah, I think I haven't talked to him actually too much about I know he was in the oil field, but I think he had quit by the time I was into Ultra4. But he was more into frac technology and stuff like that, I believe, but I'm 100% certain. But yeah, he's just a hardworking guy, just, like me, that just has a passion for racing. So, but obviously I think he was just working for somebody and not as an owner of a business.
That's right.
So when he got to a point where he just, was able to just race full time, but I have other obligations. To keep the ball rolling.
Right. Yeah, that's something else. But you've drilled some pretty cool places, like, and I always mess up the name of this town, the name of this country. I stop.
Kyrgyzstan.
Yeah, Kyrgyzstan. And what do you do over there?
I think I was over there for 4 or 5 months. We were actually up at like 14,000 feet near the border of China. So Kyrgyzstan it's bordered by China, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and I think that's about it. I don't know too much about the area over there, but it's just sketchy. So typically when we drill an area like that, we're just up in the mountains somewhere drilling. It's not, we're not in town. We're just out there, because you start showing up in town, you might get your head chopped off. But
right.
It wasn't that bad where we were at. But when we were there, I was actually physically on the job site in Kyrgyzstan, they threw the president out and burned the capital city. So I go in there, for a 3-month stint, and I go back out to fly out, and then the whole city's burnt down, boarded up with plywood. It's a crazy experience. It's just
basically Detroit. Yeah.
I don't know. I've never been to downtown Detroit, but it's probably something similar to that.
Similar. It's what I envision.
Yeah.
And then you ended up in Madagascar too. What? We've all seen the Disney Pixar movies, Madagascar, but no, we're talking about the real country off the coast of Africa.
It was a pretty cool experience. I think everybody should go to a third world country before they're 25. And I'm not talking about Mexico. Mexico, it's not, there's some bad stuff in, the further down you go in Mexico, but I think a lot of people take it for granted what we have here, but I remember just getting off the plane in Kenya, and it was just an eye-opening experience to get there and see how poor these people were. And we came in there and we were trying to start a big mine up for them, to make, people opportunity there. But it's just amazing. Those people are working for like a couple dollars a day. So I ended up spending about 7-8 months over there, and we actually loaded up a AN-124 Antonov with 4 drill rigs, a 518 cat log skidder, a D6 cat with a winch on the back, 2 Connexes, all the drilling equipment, and like wood chippers and enough gear to last us 7-8 months, all on one plane.
And this is this huge, ugly Russian cargo jet.
It's a Russian cargo jet that was made to haul this Russian space shuttle. So the nose tips up in this plane, and the tail has a big ramp in the back, and it's so big that you could drive 2, bulldozers side by side all the way through it. It's just one big shell, like a big, shell with a big crane system inside of it. But we basically flew that thing. It took 5 days to get over there, just because it has to land for fuel every 4 hours or something like that.
Pass everything but a gas station.
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, but it was a cool experience. They were like, "You guys we got some room on this plane. You guys want to get in?" We were like, "Sure, man, we're coming in." So we fly on this plane, and it has one window for in the passenger compartment. That's, it's like an 8-inch window, and it's so high off the ground you can't really see anything until it's 200 yards out there, because you're on the upper part of the circle of the airplane fuselage. So you couldn't really tell if this airplane, it rumbled so much. You couldn't tell if this airplane was flying, taking off, or taxiing down the runway or anything. The whole plane just rumbled. And it was pretty crazy.
That's some blind faith, right? You just had to have some blind faith that this thing is actually going to defy the laws of physics and gravity and go through the air, right?
Well, those guys do. They really know their business, and it had to land. And when we landed in Madagascar, it had to land between, midnight and 2:00 in the morning due to air density, because the runway was too short. So they go in there and they have someone on the ground checking air density when this plane lands, because
that's pretty cool.
It's so big. Yeah. So, but it was pretty cool that most jobs like that, you would have to, put all your stuff in containers and ship it over by boat, and then try and deal with customs and get all your stuff out of customs. This way, we were just like on the ground drilling in a week, from go time, which was a huge benefit to the client to be able to get their, it was for a nickel mine, and be able to get that mine up and improved before some other mines came up.
So how did you win a bid like that? Or how did you even go about getting flanged up with a nickel mine in Madagascar?
Well, this was before, when I was working for not my own company, but when I was working for the other company. And it was actually, they were part of a mining group.
Okay.
So they had kind of a mining group, and that mining group needed the help. So it was like, okay, we can do this, and we'll do it. You want us to show up there in a week? Well, 2 weeks, we can do that, but this is what it's going to cost, because we got to rent this airplane. So we actually use that same airplane to go to Kyrgyzstan too, because it's actually pretty beneficial to get somewhere fast. Versus,
wow. It's kind of like the Pony Express, right? That's like overnight delivery with your own Russian cargo jet.
Overnight delivery with a whole drilling fleet. You just show up and you buy some pickups when you land on the ground and work.
I feel like we should get into to gun running. I feel like you're flying around some countries that are always at war. I feel like we've missed our calling. Desert racer, gun runner. I feel there's something there.
I try and do legal stuff, but
yeah,
I do love guns, but it's crazy. Like, you just land, and then we just start loading on semis, like no customs, no nothing. If you wanted to bring guns, that's the way to do it. Just, I remember landing there, and this old rickety semi shows up to load our stuff on, and it's the guy comes out, sandals on, that are all beat up, and pants with holes in them, and he starts banging the pins out for the ramps on the semi, and he's got a stick with a rock, with some rope holding the rock on there for a hammer, and that's what he's beating the pins out on. It's just
Same thing, cavemen used 10,000 years ago. We're still there.
It's crazy. You'll see entire families. There's really no gravel there. So, because it's on a big rock island, but you'll see these rock quarries where these families will just be chipping rock out of this mountain. And they pretty much they'll chip out these bricks for building houses. They'll try and, it's a pretty crude brick. And anything that's, small enough for rock goes in the rock pile. And then anything small enough for that goes in the sand pile. And you'll see these families just smashing two rocks together, sitting there cross-legged, smashing rocks together to make smaller rocks. I mean, that's essentially how poor that country is. It's just everything is done by hand. It's, if you go there for, the time that I spent there, 7-8 months, I mean, it's just, you get back to America and you're just like so glad to be back. It's
kissing the ground, and the consumer economy that we have here, and no matter whatever it is you want, you can buy it. If no one makes it or it's too expensive, you design it yourself and you make it yourself.
Well, you can at least, here you can at least work for something. You could, my motto has always just been like, go out and work harder than the other guy, and that's how you get ahead. There, you could work as hard as you want, and it doesn't get you anywhere because there's nothing to work for.
Well, I think it's the same for me. The saying is work smart, not hard. And
yeah, you definitely want to work smart, but you want to, I shouldn't say work hard, but like accomplish more than, just try and get more stuff accomplished and done in a day. And, at some point you'll be further ahead than the other guy.
You hope so when the dust settles, right? When your sand pile settles, you're measuring sand piles.
Yeah. Well, the problem is with racing, you're racing against all those guys with the same thought process. So it's like, at work, if you got a job at McDonald's or something and you're like, okay, I'll just make more burgers than that guy, that'd be pretty easy to do. But when you're going racing against the best guys in the world, I mean, all those guys have that same mindset, and it's pretty tough. Everybody wants to win. It's, and nobody wants second
at all.
Well, there's probably 10 guys in Ultra4 that, we look at as true competitors. There's a few guys out there that are a little slower and maybe just, there for the experience, but there's probably 10, maybe 15 guys, depending on the race, that are just in it for number one, and they're all in the, same thought process as, me. So it's
wired the same.
It's tough. Yeah. Yeah. We're all wired the same. We're just all trying not to hit that rock and destroy the car.
Well, so this is a great place to jump into this. We've seen where you're from, Alaska to Utah, to how you ended up in the drilling, in the world, and your job, and going worldwide and experiencing all that. How did you end up in Ultra4? You've been racing Ultra4 for what, 6 years now, 5 years, somewhere in there?
I started racing in 2014. So it's just been one of those dreams as a kid that I always looked at those magazines. I mean, it was always magazines back when we were kids. I mean, you probably know that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the same.
Old as shit.
It wasn't. Yeah. Yeah. So it was always magazines. We would look and be like, oh, these desert trucks, look at these guys racing the Baja 1000. That was always like, look at these guys racing down the Baja. Look at these guys racing the Mint. And it was always like in the back of my head, like, I want to go do that someday. So, I mean, finally, when I was able to go do that, like financially, I decided it probably wasn't the best to jump right into a trophy truck. I mean, that was my plan, but it was like, okay, if I jump into this trophy truck, who's going to come down and help me fuel this trophy truck? And who's going to come down, how am I going to go 1,000 miles? Because I don't know Dave Cole at this moment in time. He's probably not going to come help me out to go racing. So I was like, okay, Ultra4 was starting out, and they actually had a race in Utah. So I went over and just checked it out, and I was like, okay, these guys have real race cars, and it seems like something I can maybe get into, and then, see how I like it, and kind of use it as a stepping stone or something to Baja racing. But so I kind of have been into it since I started building the truck. Well, I had a company start building the truck in 2012, but it took them 2 years to build it. So I didn't race it until, so my first race was actually NorCal rock racing because I wanted to qualify for King of the Hammers in 2014. And it was, you have to qualify into King of the Hammers unless you wanted to go into LCQ. So they finished the truck and it's like, obviously not finished that well. I mean, it was just, put those bolts in, let's go racing. And I go to NorCal and I ended up winning the race. I won like $5,000 and won the race, got qualified for King of the Hammers. I'm like, oh, this is pretty easy to race against these guys, but little did I know it was not that easy.
Yeah, that was beginner's luck, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there just wasn't that many good racers down there at that time racing. So, you show up to King of the Hammers and it's just like a huge eye opener of like, well, I don't even know how to rock crawl. So what am I doing in these rocks? I mean, because I don't come from a rock crawling background or anything like that. I like to drive fast, so I'm still trying to learn the rocks.
But you read terrain pretty well.
I think that's probably my best attribute to racing is terrain reading. And I think that I get that I think it's terrain reading and holding momentum. And I think I get a lot of that from, snowmobiling, even snowboarding, trying to keep your speed through spots and trying to look at terrain and how I can hit this without, blowing out my legs or, trying to go up this jump or, just reading terrain like that and trying to find the smooth spots. So I think that definitely helped me a lot in racing, especially in Ultra4 racing, because it's pretty much, to me, it's pretty much choosing two lines for my two tires is how I go about racing. Is, what am I going to put that tire on? What am I going to put that tire on? But
right
in the rocks, I kind of get confused because it's a big puzzle.
And you're trying to solve it at speed as it's coming at you, which is fun.
Yeah,
I think that's the exciting part.
Speed, and I think when I first started racing, I was just like, I'll just hit this thing super fast and try and blow through it. And then rear diff hangs on it. So there's actually a lot of talent. It takes a lot of skill to go through rocks, and especially at speed. And it just takes seat time. So.
Cleanly through rocks at speed. Everyone can go through rocks with speed.
I mean, it's just, rocks are crazy. You can move over 1 foot and have a totally different line, or you can put your tire on this rock and go over that rock because it picked the side of the car up. It's just knowing your car and knowing the rocks. I mean, I think that's one of my biggest struggles is KOH. It's, I always end up rolling the truck or doing something dumb, and I don't seem to have that problem in any other race but KOH. So,
well, maybe this year's the year, right? As we approach KOH 2021, but I don't want to get too far ahead.
This year is definitely the year. I mean, we're definitely going for it. But KOH it's a pretty fast pace. I mean, so you just have to know those rocks really well and know what your car can do. It's kind of a different deal than, going down to race Baja where you're just trying to, keep the truck together for 1,000 miles and go a decent pace, but you're not pushing it like KOH. It's going to be amazing when we do win KOH.
The thing that always, I know everyone struggles with this at KOH. It's you have your heart rate up and your processor up as you're running, 60, 70, 80 or 90 across, or 100 something across the lake bed. And then you drop into one of the canyons and you need to drop to 1 mile an hour, 3 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour, but your brain is still processing at a completely different speed and your heart's at a completely different speed.
Yeah. It's KOH is like nothing else out there. I mean, it just goes from these massive puzzling rock features that you have to try and get your car over to 120 mile an hour plus stuff, to big whoops, to sand, to loose rocks mixed with sand. I mean, it's just one thing after another. In that 8 hours of KOH, it's just one mistake can take you out, and you just can't have those mistakes.
You just put it together.
You have to put it together. I mean,
it seems like, look at Marcos this year. Marcos had it together and then ripped an A-arm off within a mile, or 2 miles or 3 miles out, whatever that was. It wasn't very far out. or Blyler rolling on backdoor.
Well, that just shows you the pace. You know what I mean? These people aren't in it to lose. They're in it for the number one position. And if it takes jumping off backdoor and rolling your truck, or, hitting that rock because you're going too fast around a corner. I mean, that's where the racing in KOH has gotten. It's almost a sprint.
Yeah.
Through the rocks, and you just have to keep pace.
And
I think all of Ultra4 racing is like that. The speed these cars are going through the rocks these days is just crazy.
And all the while keeping Eric Miller at bay.
Yeah, Eric's. I mean, we definitely can pull him in the desert, but he just got that car working so well in the rocks. He's like a ninja.
He is a ninja. I like that word. Ninja. Rock ninja.
Yeah.
So what was your first year attending KOH? Like, did you ever go as a spectator, or was your first year that 2015 to race it after you qualified at NorCal?
2014. So 2014 KOH was my first year. No, it was straight to 4,400. Straight qualified at NorCal, fix up my car. Don't know too much about prep. Don't know too much about anything, but show up at KOH and go racing.
How'd that go? I never went back and looked. How did 2014 go for you?
I don't really remember. I'd have to think about it, but not very well. I don't think I finished. I don't think it was going that horrible. I think I ended up blowing a rear pinion coming out of spooners. So we lost the rear diff because it was a high pinion spinning on the coast side.
Okay.
And, me being new to racing probably had a lot to do with it,
not lifting at the right moment.
Yeah, not knowing what your parts can withstand. I think a lot of guys can drive with a high pinion rear engine motor setup, but if you don't understand it all and you come into racing, you can definitely blow it up pretty easy. But I think that year we ended up losing the rear diff coming out of spooners, so I didn't have much to go. But I mean, I was, I don't know, probably in the top 20, but nowhere near the lead pack.
Yeah, they'd walked away.
Well, yeah, but it was definitely an eye opener. It was just, you can imagine, just get a 4,400 car. Let's go race King of the Hammers. I mean, it's just, now people would think you're dumb. But that's just, it is what it is.
But no, you're still with it though. So at what point did you start deciding you were going to change your car? And by change, I mean, build your own. And by that, I mean, you're self-taught at SolidWorks. I've seen your CAD models that you kick out of your plan for your vehicles and the things you're changing. You're really irregular on posting content on Instagram. You're not on Facebook. And I've heard that from, Alan Johnson with Ultra4 always gives, me a hard time about you. He's like, Paul is in everything. He's at every race. I take pictures. We go to post content, and then I can't tag him on Facebook. So, but on Instagram, you're very active. And like I said, you're self-taught in every aspect of your life, everything that we've talked about to this point. I don't know if people haven't caught on to that trend with you, is how much you're self-taught and how much you push that envelope of if you don't know it or understand it, you're doing it and figuring it out and moving forward, from all the way from those haggling trucks to your little mini jet boat to doing turbo kits for snowmobiles. Now you're an Ultra4, and you've set the bar, right? You've set the bar that you didn't finish KOH, and now you're going after it. And so somewhere in there, you teach yourself SolidWorks and you start building cars for yourself. What was that genesis?
I always loved to build things. I mean, it was just like back in the day, like, okay, we want more suspension on our three-wheeler. Well, they don't sell a suspension for your three-wheeler, so get some forks off a motorcycle and put them on there. You know what I mean? So I was always into building things and working on things. I mean, I think it probably started young age. I mean, I remember my first car. It was, I was driving down the road and I seen this car under a tarp, and I'm like, I need a car. I was probably 13, 14 years old, and I was like, it looked like a Subaru. So I go knock on the guy's door and say, you want to sell that car out there? And he looks at me kind of weird, and he's like, sure. I was like, how much you want? And he's like, $500. So I go up and pull the tarp up on this car, and the roof is smashed down to the belt line. this car. And this guy's like, you still want to buy this? And I was like, yep, we'll be back tomorrow with a trailer. I think so I took that car and I just took a handyman jack, as a 13, 14-year-old kid, and just put it in there between the door sill and the roof and jacked it up and glued a window in there out of a different car because we didn't have, resources to buy. Nowadays, it's like, oh, you need a windshield, go down and buy it for $100. But back then, we didn't have $100. And windshields were hard to find, so you cut one out of another car and put it in there. So, but it was just resourcefulness like that. That's always got me through. And it's always been, if I don't understand something, I have to go out and put my hands on it and do it. It's not, someone can't teach me something in school. I've never been able to learn that way.
Okay.
So that's why college has never been good. Well, like my wife, she can go to college and learn all this stuff in school, but it's just not the way I can learn things. So I started teaching myself SolidWorks and stuff like that when I started working on snowmobiles. I was like, oh, I need to build an intercooler. I'm going to build this intercooler on a snowmobile because it, specific measurements and specific machined parts that I need. And I'm like, well, I can't afford to have that guy go build that because it's going to cost me too much money. So, well, I'll go build that myself. So I just started learning, one part at a time, like, build a little bracket. And pretty soon when I got into Ultra4 racing, it was easy for me to go out and buy a car. And I definitely didn't want to build my first car because I think it was too big of a hurdle to be competitive. It was like, I don't even know anything about cars. You know what I mean? So how am I going to build this off-road race car? I looked at them, but then when I bought the car, I just noticed a lot of downfalls in the car. So I was like, okay, we did a lot of work to that car too, but I was like, okay, I'm buying a car from somebody. Shouldn't it be like a super nice race car that's really competitive that I could race for 5-6 years at least?
No.
But it wasn't that way. So when I kind of figured out what I wanted in a car or what could be better in a car, I was like, well, I got to chop the back off, I got to chop the front off, and I got to chop the belly out of this car. So it was like, well, at that point, I'm building a whole new car. So we might as well build a new car. So I ended up designing my own car and just reading books on, suspension stuff and just trying to learn a lot, mainly just cycling, suspension, and SolidWorks, just, spending a lot of late nights, just doing CAD drawings and, trying to learn what the tire does when you do this and what the tire does when you do that and what the steering does. And just playing around a lot with it, trying to learn it. And built the first car I built, I actually didn't have I didn't build the front IFS because that's the most technical spot of the car, the steering and IFS. So I had bought an IFS from a guy and we grafted that to that car. But I wanted something so technical at that point in my life because I thought, I want the best. So I'll have, these guys build the best. But it ended up being,
It had
I think
limitations.
it was too cutting edge. It had too many. Well, they say the cutting edge is the bleeding edge,
Right.
So it had too many things in it like that didn't work right and needed to be fixed. We ended up cutting the front of that truck off. We raced it probably for 5 or 6 races, and I did not finish one race with 4-wheel drive. I show up with 4-wheel drive and all brand new parts, and by the time I got done with practice, I wouldn't have 4-wheel drive. So actually, in Glen Helen, we actually started the main event in 2-wheel drive and won that race in 2-wheel drive. And I think that was in 2016 in that truck.
I remember people joking about it at some point that you didn't even run real shafts. Like you ran like broomsticks painted black to as a joke, because the car was 2-wheel drive.
Well, we just pulled everything out of the truck because we didn't have another choice. It's not like I wanted to start the race as an underdog, but we obviously showed up to race. So it was, we're showing up to the main event, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, 1-wheel drive. It doesn't matter.
As long as you're able to go forward. Forward is what matters.
Yeah, definitely.
In that stuff though, that was the TubeWorks, that was, the game changers, right? Doesn't one of your current cars have that game changer center sections in them today, even though you've made iterations?
Yeah, well, it's actually got so when we built that car in 2016, it's actually the car Lauren Healy has right now. It actually had TubeWorks built the rear diff, which is a planetary, and then the front diff was a planetary, but it wasn't necessarily the diff that was bad. It was the planetary setup was overspinning the lockers too fast, and we couldn't get the lockers alive.
Okay, that's cool.
It was just something you didn't think about. It was like, okay, lockers are living, so why do we need to think about them? But now you're spinning the locker 3.5 times faster than a normal locker. All the ratchets will, wear out, springs wear out, everything wears out in it too fast. And then that car had like a crazy swing set type steering in it. It was just, I think we were trying to put more into it than what we knew would work. Now I kind of look at a car as I don't want to make too many changes. We want to move forward, but I don't want to sit there for a year or 2 years and not finish a race. I think if you build something too advanced, I think you're going to be in that same boat. You're just going to be fighting your car, trying to get it to work, trying to, because it seems like everything we try, there's always a learning curve to it, whether it's a transfer case or a transmission or an engine or, anything you try, it's always, oh, this didn't work. So now we try and focus on what does work and then how can we make that better versus, let's make a rocket ship.
Why orange?
Orange has been a color of mine since I was a kid. I mean, I had an orange snowmobile. I had an orange car. We actually painted orange. I taught myself how to paint cars because I was always buying wreck cars because, those were cheaper. So we would paint them. I just always been drawn to the color orange. Nothing special. It's just.
Gotcha. Just curious. Sometimes people have reasons. Talk to me about Mitch and Josh Markham. Mitch Sweat and Josh Markham. You have two really amazing guys that work with you and work for you and help you, accomplish goals. Tell me about those two guys because they're also somewhat mysterious a little bit in their own rights.
I got some amazing people helping me out racing. It's so Mitch, we kind of met probably about 6-8 months before this. I'll tell you this whole story, but so the Tube Dragon had just come out from Bentec, and Mitch he had a shop and he was looking at buying one. So they were like, oh, there's this guy, a couple miles away from you that has one. So Mitch, calls me up and can I look at your Tube Dragon? I show it to him, and I don't think too much of Mitch, until, well, he's a busy guy. So, I mean, we keep in contact, but it's like 2 weeks. Well, it was a week before nationals. And I think it was 2018 or so. And I had cut the front end, that TubeWorks front end off that car, the entire front end. And it's a week before nationals. And I'm like looking at this car, like, am I going to make this? And I'm like, well, I need some more help. So I call Mitch. And he comes over. He's like, "Yeah, I'll be right over," because he's that kind of guy that just, yeah, whatever you need, I'll be over there right now. I can drop whatever I got going, and I'll be over there to help you. He looks at me and he comes in the garage and he's just like, just the look on his face is like he's like, "This is nuts. You're not going to get this done. We might as well quit right now." But we showed up to nationals, raced, and got it done. I mean, it's just if you put your mind to something, you pretty much can. I mean, there's some limitations, but
yeah, and he's a hell of a fabricator. He's a hell of a wrench, and he'll do anything.
He's been a big asset to the team. I mean, Mitch and Josh both, and we got a couple other amazing guys that help us too. But I mean, we'll talk more on those guys in a bit. But Mitch, he fabricates and works for a guy that runs a Razor in Best in the Desert. He actually raced Best in the Desert in his own Razor for a few years, so he's kind of that guy that has that racing, loves racing. I mean, it's just his passion. So he always tells me, it's the lifestyle. So
yeah, it absolutely is.
So he just, whatever it takes, he just loves it. And, same with Josh. I met Josh. There was a company called Midnight 4x4 in Salt Lake that sells a bunch of off-road parts and tubing and all kinds of stuff. They're a pretty core shop. And I would buy my tubing, build cars, and first Josh probably like, who's this guy buying all this tubing? But finally he's like, if you're buying all this tubing, maybe I should come check out your projects. So he's like, he comes up and checks it out. He's like, man, can I just come up and help you guys? And we're like, sure, So Josh came up and helped, and and
Yeah,
he's
in his business, right? Yeah, you said it's Midnight 4x4 there in Salt Lake City, right?
That's right. Yeah, Midnight 4x4. They're online also, so they sell a bunch of off-road parts. Pretty much anything you need. And plus, guys like Josh that work there can get you whatever you need. They don't even have it. They can source it. They're just resourceful people. But Josh is also a good fabricator. He can weld. We can all weld. We can all do all this work, and we kind of split it up. Like, I'll do the CAD work. I'll do some of the welding, but I just can't do it all. I mean, you can't build it. A car like that takes 2,000 to 3,000 hours, like man hours. And for me to accomplish something like that, it would take me a couple of years. So if you want to get a car out, you just have to have a few talented people and just, put in the hours when it spits out the other side. But you definitely can't do it by yourself unless you're willing to, get a car in 2 or 3 years when technology has changed.
It moves that fast right now.
Yeah. So, but all of us, we kind of take on different skills and, or different tasks, get it done. But those guys are just, it's amazing. Those guys are just, when we go racing, I'll think of like, oh, I don't want to change the gearing in the truck. And Josh and those guys, as soon as I come back in, they're like already like, do we need to change the gearing? And I was like, no, I don't want to pull this out. And they're like, oh, we're changing the gearing. I mean, they're like, they want to win more than I want to win. Sometimes it seems like, you know what I mean? I want to win, but it's like, man, that's going to be 2 or 3 hours work. But, those guys are just like, man, we're going to win this race. We're going to pull this transfer case, pull this transmission, whatever we got to do, whatever we have parts for, it's going in this truck. I mean, we're working all night if we got to. And I think that's the mindset your whole team has to have to actually go out there and accomplish something like, winning a race or doing well.
Well, I think a lot of guys have said this. We've said it on this show before many times, and I believe it's sinking in for some, but the race is won in the shop, man. It's won in prep and it's won in the pit, right? Before the race, before the green flag drops.
Yeah, it's definitely, car setup is huge. And, now we have a lot of notes, but we're also, Ultra4 is always changing venues and going to different places. So we don't necessarily have gearing notes or, what we need or what. So we're always changing. And I think that was a big problem with me at Crandon this year is the new truck. I go out and, instant rev limiter. We went out and tested it, but it felt really good, But I think that's where a lot of people I think racing to me has been my test ground, has been my proving ground where a lot of people go out and test and think their car can go win a race, but racing is the best test you can put on a car, hands down.
Oh, absolutely.
So we would go out and test this truck. Oh, it feels great. You go out to a race. Oh, we're on the rev limiter, because the race is the only place you're putting that car at 100%. Otherwise you think it's doing great. You're just hitting, doing a donut out in the desert. And you don't even realize you need 10 more mile an hour out of the truck.
Yeah, there's no replacement for green flag time.
Yeah, I think that's why I try and do as many races as possible because I just want that experience. It's just like you said, there's zero better experience than actual seat time racing somebody because then you are pushing the limits. Everybody's pushing the limits. You, your crew, everybody's just there to win the race, and but like you said, a lot of it's prep, tuning. Unfortunately, the hard thing with me is tuning, like these trucks. I almost think that tuning on the track is probably the best way to tune.
Well, you try to get your dope sheet, right? You know the train, you have an idea where, at least a starting point, and then you get some practice in, and then you get the qualifying in, and you have different cuts at kind of the fine tune, right?
We look at it as any edge we can to win. I mean, whether we'll gear the truck for 3 mile an hour, so whatever we can do to be more competitive. I mean, whatever it takes.
Do you run any data acquisition on your cars?
Yeah, we have the Life Racing Danzio, that whole Danzio.
That's what it was.
Engine package has Life Racing in it, and it has a full data log system on it. But it only really records, engine temperature, transfer case temperatures, those parameters, front diff, rear diff. It does some like transmission slippage, stuff like that, but we don't have any like shock sensors or anything like that. That's more seat of the pants. Like, oh, I can go faster. This is hurting me. We need to adjust this.
That's fair. Let's talk about your single seater real quick, because I think this is the perfect place to talk about your current single seater that you just took. You took second at nationals with, and you didn't have a lot of luck with this year, but you did. The problem is, it's not a problem. It's just you're there to win, and second place is truly the first loser for you, and the way you look at your car. And this is a brand new car, and you guys race at, COVID threw all sorts of monkey wrenches into everything. But as I was talking to Mitch and I were discussing how many races you guys did on that car in like a 4-week or 6-week period of time. It was like Crandon, NorCal, Moab, Oklahoma, or somewhere in there. Like you fit in race. Is that right? It was 4 and 6 weeks.
Well, I think we did. Yeah. Well, we did 2 at Crandon. So that took up 2 races, and then raced at Moab, and then we went to NorCal.
That's right. And then showed up at nationals
all on that same car. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row on that car. And the big thing with that car to me was proving it to myself. I think that's the platform that we're going to try and build the new car around. So it was like going out to NorCal was like, okay, I can get some more seat time. We can go out in the desert, but that's really not going to prove anything to anybody. So let's go out there and see how tough this thing is. We have to go out there. We can't just build another car unless we know this car can work. And there's definitely been some bugs in it that we're, definitely getting out of it. But I think, it's taking everything we know and putting it into what we can build. Seeing that product come out is pretty cool.
Has your goal been in forward looking? I don't know if it was ever a goal back in 2014 or 2016, but now that we're in 2020 and you've put together, cars, and is one of your future goals is to build and sell some, or build, race, then sell to feed the habit?
It's been a challenge. I think I'd love to build people cars, but I don't think people want to pay what it takes to build a car to this level. And I don't want to build someone a car at the half level. So, but I also don't want to build a car and be competing with that car at some point. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Unless I can build a better car, unless I think I can build a better car. So when Lauren asked me to buy that car, I said, well, I think I can build a better car. So sure, I'll say that car. But, I've had lots of people ask me to buy these other cars, and I'm just like, they're not for sale.
I don't want to race against it.
Well, I mean, the real reason I started building race cars was so we could evolve the racing. So I look at things as like, since I design it all in SolidWorks, I know exactly what kind of camber, I know what kind of caster, I know what the steering angle, I know what the anti-squat is. I know all these numbers into these cars. And then I ride the car and I'm like, okay, this is why this car is behaving like this. Okay. And then we take it to the next car and we do a little fine tuning on it to try to make it better. And I think that's been, a big reason that we do so well is
homework.
We take that knowledge and versus, a lot of guys in the trophy trucks, they're driving the same trophy truck as the other guy. So how do you get that edge over that guy? You know what I mean?
Well, we saw it for many years where it was, T1s trophies, whatever they were, it was the class of geyser trucks, right? Everyone drove a geyser. And then finally we started to see Mason join the party, TSCO build a few, Jason Voss's truck was built by a couple guys up in the Bay Area, I believe, a father-son team. I mean, so we've seen some trucks come out that weren't all geyser, but there was a window there, like maybe 09, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there where every truck was a geyser built in Phoenix.
Yeah. But if you're doing that, you're racing, you have no advantage over the other guy. It's
none.
I mean, there's some tuning, but you have the same truck. So it's a spec series. And
that's
what I think is so cool about Ultra4 right now is build whatever you want.
Run what you brung.
run what you brung. So if you think you can build, your car a little bit different here and make it better here, try it out. It's up to you to try that. And that's what I think has kept me in Ultra4 racing is the, build my own car, the idea of I can build something faster than the other guy. I have these ideas and I want to try this, and, this car is acting this way. So let's try and lower the roll center in the truck, or, that sort of thing is, we're just fine tuning these cars to try and make them faster. So I don't believe I'm the fastest racer out there. I think I have a better weapon. I think I'll get to that point where I'm a faster racer every time I race. But, a lot of these guys have a lot more experience than I got. And seat time is huge.
That it is. And, we just came out of Thanksgiving. A lot of people were out at the Hammers testing, tuning, pre-running, just kind of getting everything kind of shaken out before they do that last teardown and final prep for what's coming at us at full speed, like 50 some days from now. But, man, we kind of cranked through everything I want to crank through. One thing I want to go back and touch on is you mentioned you've got some other guys that I want to give you the chance to give a shout out to that work on your cars with you and prep for you. I want to make sure that you are able to talk about them. I know the main two, but I know you have an incredible team. It takes more than just you and two guys.
Yeah, unfortunately, like a lot of the help that we have is, guys with other jobs or, other obligations, and they come and help on the weekends. Even Josh comes and helps on the weekends, but he usually comes to every race with us. I guess it just takes a lot of little contacts, and trying to find all these people and put them together. I got a guy, Dave, that comes and helps me weld. He's been welding for me for 3 or 4 years now, and he can just sit down and he can TIG weld for, 12 hours straight.
Wow.
Yeah. And he can just get a lot of stuff done. And I got, my brother-in-law, they came down and helped down in Baja, and he brought a few friends from Colorado. And a lot of those guys will come to KOH with us too. And, my sister helps out when she can, even if it's just watching the kids, while we're at KOH. My wife's sister, Holly, does a lot of help, race planning, hotels, all that stuff that you just don't, it's just a huge pile of stuff that you have to do to go race.
Oh, it's a logistical nightmare, and somehow we continue to solve it.
Yeah, it's massive. It's like, how are we going to feed all these people? How are we going to sleep? How are we going to get gas? How are we going to do this? So it just takes a pile of people to do it. I got this Lauren's coach, the guy that drove with Lauren, his name's Zig. He drove the 250 with Lauren. He's actually co-drove with Jeff McKinley in the Razor last year.
Okay.
He helps out a lot. Him and his brother Kai, this other guy named Ben. It's just all these people just are the only way it can happen. If I was the guy trying to race and trying to focus on racing and, working on my car and doing all that stuff, it's
too much.
It's just not possible.
At least to run in that, that top front pack.
Yeah, I'm pretty blessed with the people that we have, helping out, and the whole, mindset of the whole team of people, trying to get the job done.
I think that's also a personal reflection on you, right? You've proven that you're goal oriented, you want success, you plan to achieve success. And the thing is, people like to be successful, right? And you've surrounded yourself with other people that are successful at the same time. Just like going to Baja with Lauren and Dave Cole, you've surrounded yourself with success. They view you as a successful individual and have surrounded themselves with you. Same with, your team, and they all kind of, it's kind of like, I know you've worked on a crew like this, especially on a drill rig. It takes, if everybody's positive and upbeat, it makes the job go good. It makes everything's good, but you take that one guy that's negative all the time and he just kind of poisons the well.
Yeah. You definitely can't have those kind of people around.
Yeah, not in this environment. Well, I'd written down, I always hit this spot, in the show where I always ask about the future, and I'll tell you what my future. I had 4 bullet points, and sadly we've hit some, and I wrote this before Baja, right? And it was win Baja. Done. You did that. Congratulations again. I think that's so freaking cool, so epic that you guys pulled that off, in the way you did. Spectacular. Well done. The next one was win KOH. You're there, right? You're in the hunt.
that's the next goal. I mean, it's just, that's the next thing on the plate, you know. It's just a lot of work. I mean, I think a lot of people look at racing from the sidelines and think of, you know, it looks fun. You know, I get a lot of people that tell me, "Oh, is that a lot of fun?" And it's enjoyable, but it's more the challenge, I think. And I think that's kind of our whole team focus is this is a challenge, and we're trying to, you know, win this challenge. I mean,
rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Well, in Baja, I mean, those guys were up working on the truck till 3 a.m, 3 nights in a row before we even went racing, you know. And then we left the starting line. I mean, we didn't, it was nonstop work. I mean, pre-running, working on the pre-runner, working on the race car, just keeping everything alive. And, you know, these guys just don't stop. You know, it's like, okay, you need me to do that? Yep, I got that. And this guy, you know, everybody's just pitching in, and it's just, everybody's in it for the win.
Well, and when you talk to people outside of this circle, they look at you, you know, when you talk to, let's call it other humans, other humans are like, you work really, really hard to have fun. Why do you work so hard to have fun? Why don't you just go to a beach and lay around on the beach? Like, that's fun, right? Well, no, but it's not a challenge.
Yeah, there's no challenge in that. So, I mean, it would probably be relaxing, but I've never been the kind of guy to go relax on a beach.
There
so,
you go.
I mean, this is kind of my world. So, I mean, it seems like the harder we work and the more we got to stay up till 3 a.m. working, the more we win. So whatever it takes to win.
Right. The sacrifices are worth it.
Yeah.
And then the next bullet point I had was build another new car ? And it sounds like you guys are, I mean, you're nonstop. So I assume you guys are cutting something up and moving forward. What's your kind of window of opportunity on rolling that thing out? You know, sometime late 2021.
Well, my plan is, I was planning to chop the front off of my 2C car that just won the Baja, but I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, if I chop the front end, my plan was, okay, I'll chop the front end off that car, and I'll have a front IFS I could build a pre-runner around. But then, if I got to build a pre-runner, I got to build a whole new car. So if I'm going to build a whole new car, I might as well build a whole new race car.
Right.
So that kind of, you know, my thought process kind of changed there, and I definitely don't want to do it before KOH. We're going to change a few things on the truck, but KOH this year is going to be it's going to be 2 races, because they're going to do the desert race the week before, and then they're going to do KOH. So you need 2 cars down there.
Right.
So we don't know which car is going to race which, but we'll be down there with both to race both races. But it all depends on the course. But I'm kind of thinking I'm going to race the 2-seat car in the desert race, and then I'm going to race the single-seat car in the
4,400 race.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see how the course looks when it all comes out, but I think that's kind of what we're thinking right now. But once that is done, we're starting on this new car by building, you know, front end components and stuff like that right now, but we're not planning on to have it done until San Felipe next year.
Okay.
That'll give us some lead. I just don't want to push these guys. I mean, they've been working so hard, and we got to have a little family time. I mean, it's just too much.
Enjoy their Christmas bonuses, you know, Jelly of the Month Club or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, we still got a lot of work to do before King of the Hammers. I mean, we have prepped 2 cars and a pre-runner. They're all, you know, pretty much trashed.
Are you still pre-running that pinhole car?
I am. I'm pre-running the pinhole car. My goal would be to sell the pinhole car and use the 2-seat truck as the new pre-runner and build a new truck.
That makes sense. Only makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah, nothing wrong with the pinhole car. It's just I like to drive my own stuff, but it's definitely done its purpose. It's going to be nice just driving our own stuff. It just, I don't know, to me it feels better, you know, like I build this truck, you know.
No, there's a confidence factor, and there's a 100% known factor, right? That you know this like the back of your hand. And then, man, my last question, my last bullet point for the future was, what are your thoughts on what's the future for Ultra4? What are the next steps? Like where's the technological advances going to come that push what we do and what you do today to the next level?
As in cars?
Yeah.
Well, I think Ultra4, the problem with Ultra4 is it's so diverse that you almost need 3 race cars. You need a short course car, you need a desert car, and then you need a KOH car. And all 3 of those cars don't add up into one car, because your short course car, you don't have an extra guy in there for KOH to help you read notes or help you winch or anything like that. Your desert car is a little too big for KOH because, it got these obstacles. It depends on the course, but, your wheelbase might be too big. You might have, too much weight carrying around. But then you go out in the desert and you want a big heavy car that can haul a lot of fuel and spare tires and parts and be comfortable. So if you put all that into perspective, you need 3 different race cars to have the best of everything. So I think we're going to do a little convertible work on this new car where it can solve the problem of 2 race cars. But the Ultra4, the way I see it, is you just need reliable parts that can get beat on and handle these kind of races that they're doing. And then I think shocks are going to be a big part of it. I think Fox is coming out with some live valve tuning that you'll see at KOH. And
yeah, we've had some discussions about that. I think that's really cool tech. I think that's the next step, right?
Yeah, I think they're on the leading edge of developing that stuff, and I think that's going to be a big benefit. Tires, I think we're on probably the best tire out there. I think there could be a benefit of a little bit larger tire at KOH.
Like move into a 42 or
move into a 42, yeah. Because that's the next step, right? But you got to have the car that can handle that. But if you can have a 42, now you can, get up that ledge a little easier or get over this. But the problem has been wheels. They're moving to a 20-inch wheel, and then the wheel is too big and it's too weak. So, but I think there could be something there with a little bit bigger tire, maybe a 41. Anything be better than the other guy.
Well, you're wearing a Nitto hat, so I would say maybe the conversation needs to flow through like Chris Corbett and up and be like, we need a 41 for competition. Help us out here.
It's just so hard to get that done.
We know. We absolutely know. Well, man, Paul, I was so worried's not the right word, but I'd really wanted to interview you for a long time. I've had you on a list for a long time. I didn't know you very well, and you're real quiet, and guys like Will Gentile had told me, hey man, he's a hard interview, but man, I've had a great night with you, like a great session. Did we cover everything that you wanted to cover?
I think so. I think we talked for quite a long time.
We did. This is probably the longest one I've ever had, but you got to make the finale, for this season, you got to make it good. And I think you absolutely did that. You filled in a lot of blanks for a lot of folks, including myself. I don't think I had anything, left out there that didn't get answered. I'd been told you were an interesting fella, and listening to your stories, interesting is not the word I would use to describe you. You are, but I find you to be super inspirational. I find your drive and your ability to get, keep your eye on the prize, to finesse and keep moving the ball forward and progressing no matter what it is, refreshing. I find that inspirational. I found that you're a super humble guy, which is super cool. I mean, a lot of people in Ultra4 are, like I said, the birds of a feather flock together, but from your humble beginnings in Alaska to, a house with no electricity, but running water if you only turn the generator on, to, drilling, core wells all over the world, and some crazy stories there, to now living in Park City with your own ski lifts in your backyard and racing at the upper echelon of off-road rock sports is super inspirational, man. From me, I'm sure from other people, but from me, thank you for sharing your story with me. I had no idea you were as cool and as awesome as you are. I'd heard stories, but now I know for myself, and hopefully now everyone else will hear this as well. I caught you. The most mysterious man in Ultra4.
Well, hopefully they don't think I'm too mysterious anymore. I'm just a normal guy. I just love racing. Just the whole atmosphere of, competition is just what has driven me my whole life. And we're going down that road. We're just trying to win races.
Here in a couple weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, however many weeks it is now, because it's coming up so fast. Hammers, I'll stop in, see you. We'll have some waters together, or some coffees if it's real early in the morning, and we'll figure it out, man. Paul, thank you for coming on the Talent Tank. I appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
All right, guys. I hope you guys appreciate this episode. Man, Paul Horschel. All right. We're out.
Thank you for listening and taking a dive into the Talent Tank. Please like and subscribe on Instagram @The Talent Tank or our website, thetalenttank.com.